So this is Faith and Confidence. This is the 44th class in this series. And you can watch the rest of them on patreon.com/mgenuth. That's not for you. You get the links.
I'll get the links?
Okay. So last time we began to see this maybe seminal statement by the Friediger Rebbe, and we'll read it again today, that the Baal Shem Tov, what he did was he took faith and he turned it into confidence. Or to say it more literally, to have faith in confidence. And you can understand that in a number of different ways in Hebrew, but it's literally transforming faith into confidence. Last time when we talked about it, we said that what he did was that he turned the concealed trait that has being, but it's concealed, into something, concealed trait that has no being into a concealed trait that has being. Or in Hebrew, it's from He'elem she'eno b'mtziut le'elem she'yeshno b'mtziut. So we talked about the idea that Mashiach, or anything that you're looking forward to in the future, so the future is like He'elem she'eno b'mtziut. It's something concealed and it's not in being yet. It hasn't come into reality yet because it's in the future. And so to turn it into something that is in being is to say that it's already here, but it's still concealed. That's one step towards making it revealed. It's an important step towards making it revealed. After that, it becomes revealed. But so we brought the two the parables in Chassidus that are used for this. There's a number of different parables, but the most well known is that the spark inside the stone, the flint stone, is like something that is concealed and not in being, because as much as you will tear the stone apart and crumble it and crush it, you won't find a spark inside. So the spark is concealed and not in being inside the flint stone. But in an ember that's been in a fire, but now it's maybe dimmed, there's no open flame, but the flame is inside. So that's called something that's concealed but in being. It already exists. So all you have to do to bring it out is maybe blow on it a little bit, and the flame comes out. Sometimes you have to blow on it a lot. But the flame is still inside. If it becomes a piece of coal, then of course you have to relight it. So the flame is no longer in being. It's concealed and not in being. Okay. So when it came to talking about Hashem's presence in the world, in a messianic state, so the Baal Shem Tov changed. He was able to change the way things are. He was able to bring faith. He was able to bring faith into confidence. It means to take, we'll see this more today, from the future and bring it into the present. But it's still concealed, but it's already here. It's here in the present. So in general, when a person is living his life, we live our lives, so we have a feeling that time is not on our side. That's the normal feeling that people have. People usually feel that somehow time is not on my side, that I'm running out of time. We'll talk about this some more today, but the somehow I know there are more of them. I just don't know. Here, I think this is it. I hope this is it.
One more about the feeling of running out of time.
Why do we feel? It's the same as last week. You don't need a new one. It's the exact same thing as last week. So what we want to discuss today is that really a person's well-being, mental well-being, depends on how much time he feels that he has. That if you feel that you have a little bit of time, or no time at all, then you act one way. And if you feel that you have infinite time, you act in a completely different way. And everywhere in between, there's different levels. So you can almost say that this whole mashal of, this whole parable of something being concealed and not in being, or being concealed and in being, one of the best ways to understand it is in relation to how you perceive time. How you perceive how much time you have to live your life. And so we talked many times about, in many cases we talked about how important it is that therapy starts from rekindling the faith that a person has. And what is the faith? The faith is faith in the future, that the future is good. That regardless of what state I am in now, the future is good. So that it begins with that. But really, it's even more than that, as we'll see today, that it's about feeling that it's not just that the future is good, but first of all, that there is a future. And maybe not just a future, maybe there's infinite time. And the more you can grasp that, the more your mentality shifts from focusing on the past to focusing on the future, the more mental well-being there is. And the more you can plan, the more you can do, the more time you have. Is that even in terms of how calm a person is? A person is calm depending on how much time he has. People get very uptight about things or have anxiety or whatever it is. It's probably in the end because there's a feeling that there's not enough time, there's not enough room here. So you get all kinds of this claustrophobia, which is an element of that. And there is agoraphobia, and all these things. But in general, probably all the phobias in the end, they start from an incorrect conception, not an incorrect, but a detrimental conception of how time is in my life. So let's read again what we saw here. From all this, line 594, from all this we can more readily understand the words spoken by the previous Rebbe one Seder night. And it is what stood. It, or she is what stood. We fixed this last week. She is faith. My father of blessed memory said, meaning the Rashab, said that the Baal Shem Tov brought into the world faith in confidence. So you can read these words in Hebrew or even in Yiddish in a few different ways. It's either faith in confidence or to have faith in confidence itself. It's either you're putting faith into confidence or you're having faith in confidence. Meaning that when a person believes, he is certain it will also become a reality. That what a person believes, he is certain will also become a reality. Meaning, what I believe in, I'm also certain will become a reality. So that's faith in confidence, because I believe in it. But without confidence, I can't bring it into existence. I can't take it from something that's not in existence to something that is in existence. Again, it doesn't mean that it's already revealed. It could be concealed. But at least it's here already. It is already in existence, and the only delay in its being revealed stems from it itself. Meaning there's still one stage that needs to happen, which is the revelation of whatever I believe in, that it depends, you have to have patience because it depends on the thing itself. So for instance, when talking about Mashiach, so there's something that depends on Mashiach itself. The Mashiach has to also decide that he wants to reveal himself. But it's up to you to have an understanding that it's already here in existence. That's what the Rebbe stressed many times, that Mashiach is here already. Why don't I see him? Because he is concealed. It's concealed. Okay. It is thus, so here he has a few more things on this. It is thus clear, we'll come back to this. It is thus clear that the Baal Shem Tov's path and direction was to unify the Yud-K, which we explained 2 or 3 classes ago. The Yud-K is the faith. Faith connects Yud and Hey together. Together with Vav-K, which we said is joined by the power of confidence. The Baal Shem Tov's unification is called making faith stand. להעמיד את האמונה. להעמיד, so we've talked about this many times. The word לעמוד in Hebrew has different meanings. So one of the meanings is present, right? Zman omed, present time is called in Hebrew zman omed. It's one of the ways that it's described. So if you're standing, it means you're in the present. But to stand also means not just the present, but what you would call an infinite present. How does it work? He says here, the root to stand in Hebrew has several meanings. And in this case, the reference is to the phrase, and the oil stood. In the story about the wife of one of the prophets cried out to Elisha. It is explained that the cruse of oil which Elisha asked her to take, and from which oil would be poured into countless other vessels, is the root power of faith in every Jew. That the oil stood refers to the drawing down of faith into absolute confidence until it becomes an aspect of masculine which fights fiercely against evil. I'm not going to read all of this. One of the problems that we have is too many sources. There's too much information overload. So I have to explain a lot about what it means. So instead of reading the sources, you'll believe me that it says this. Instead, I'll try to explain what they mean. So we need to read the story there. So you have the story. Either you got it last week, or if you didn't get it last week, somebody not get it? For some reason? Maybe I'm one of the people that know. You have it here. You have it on your pages.
26.
This one?
Right.
Bottom of 26.
Do you have an extra one?
Oh, this one.
So Chavi took them, I think, and I don't know where they are.
I think this one.
It's in a footnote.
Yeah.
For those who got pages
26.
today, it's in a
Page
footnote.
26.
Otherwise, you received it last week. So one of the people who didn't receive it last week is probably me, which makes it a little bit difficult. So somebody's going to have to let me just read the story. So the story is a certain woman, the wife of one of the disciples of the prophets, cried out to Elisha. Elisha is, who's the disciple? Who was Elisha's teacher? Eliyahu. After Eliyahu passed away, Elisha took his place. And she said to him, so that there was this wife of one of the prophets. The sages say this was the wife of Obadiah, a prophet who was actually a convert. You see, he was Obadiah Edomi. He's from Edom. And Achav and Izebel had many prophets killed, and he was among them. So she was left a widow, and she cried out to Elisha. She said, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know how your servant revered the Lord. And now a creditor is coming to seize my 2 children as slaves." This is halacha, by the way, unfortunately. That you can do this thing. What does it mean? Indentured servants. It says slaves here. That's how they translate Eved always. But Eved really means an indentured servant. So Elisha said to her, "What can I do for you? Tell me, what have you in the house?" And she replied, "Your maidservant has nothing at all in the house except a cruse of oil or a jug of oil." So he said, "Go and bring and borrow vessels outside from all your neighbors, empty vessels, as many as you can. Then go in and shut the door behind you and your children, and pour oil into all those vessels, removing each one as it is filled." She said, bring as many vessels as you can. She has 1 jug of oil, 1 cruse, and she begins to pour into them. It's like the Baba Sali, he pours in, and it fills up, and he keeps pouring. As long as you don't look inside the first jug, everything's fine. And he told her, bring as many vessels as you can, because as long as you'll be pouring, there'll be more oil. Then what happened? She went away and shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing vessels to her, and she kept pouring. But when the vessels were full, so when each vessel as it filled, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And finally, he said to her, "There are no more vessels." They borrowed as many vessels as they can. That was the end of it. And the oil stopped. So in Hebrew it says "Vayamod Hashem." It doesn't say Hashem and Ifsik, Hashem and Pasak, as he would say that it stopped. Really, it says the oil stood. Okay. She came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your children can live on the rest." Okay? So, what is this story about? It's about oil. That oil, what do you get from this? That oil has a quality of having some infinite power inside of it that you don't have in. Maybe it could have been with anything. But we have many stories about oil that are like this, right? In retrospect, it's easy to see that the story of Hanukkah is based on this story, right? That they found one cruse of oil, and they filled from it 8 days. It's the same thing. It's like Elisha coming back in the time of the Chashmonaim. So the oil has a certain connection to infinite. What very important number? All the numbers are important, but a really important number comes from the word oil in Hebrew.
Number?
A number,
390.
just a simple number, one digit. Shmone, 8. Why is 8 fat? Because he ate 9 and 10, right? No? What's with 8? What's the story with 8?
It's also neshama.
Over the natural. Above the
It's
natural.
above it symbolizes what's beyond the natural. So you have the cycle of the nature, which is 7 days. And again, there's nothing in nature that says that, except that the Torah tells us that that's how God created the world in 7 days. There's nothing in nature that indicates there's something special about 7. But since God created nature in 7 days, so the 8th day, there's even a very popular Hebrew song called Yom Chet B'Shavua, the 8th day of the week. And if you don't know Hebrew and you don't follow Nomi Shemer, blessed memory. So there's a band in Crown Heights called 8th Day. Why do they call it 8th Day? Where they get this idea that the 8th has something to do with anything important? Because 8th day, I think they took it from the Hebrew, but I'm not sure, that the 8th day means the day after the regular cycle of time. So you're taking from some future state this concealed something that's not yet in existence, and you're trying to bring it into existence. So right now, the best you can say is it's not the 7th day, it's the 8th day. Where's the 8th day? After 7 becomes 1.
Had a song.
What?
The Beatles had a song, 8 days a week.
Really?
It's not enough to show I care.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, the same idea. If a week is 7 days, so 8 is beyond what's natural. Where's the thing? Disappeared. The sages say that when he said to her, "You'll live from this oil that you now sell and pay off your debt, and from the rest you'll live, you and your children." So the explanation in by the sages is that you'll live for now and forever. That this oil, because it revealed the power of the infinite, it has a quality of infinite sustenance inside it. And so from this oil, you can grasp what it means to have infinite time, let's call it. You can grasp what it means to have infinite existence. What does confidence then do? It takes you have to have a vision that there's infinite time, and you have to bring it into the present. So what does it feel like when the present becomes infinite? So it's said that at that moment, if you understand the infinite in the present, what you feel is that past, present, and future are one thing. The boundaries between them cancel, because boundaries are what give you a sense of passing time. Because all of time is really a boundary. Like for us, the present is just a boundary between the present and between the past and the future. But it's fleeting. It moves right away. So if you can get rid of that boundary, so suddenly the past, present, and future become one thing. And this, you could say, is the essence of what it means to have faith in confidence. Is to feel infinite within the finite. We didn't talk a lot about this, but there's a saying in Chassidus from Reb Hillel that a chassid is the power of the infinite. He's limitless. And somebody who's not a chassid is the power of the finite. He's limited. But a rebbe is somebody who is the power of the limitless within the limits. It's to take the infinity and put it within finite time. It's to draw it down, to bring down. Who has infinite before him all the time? That's Hashem. That's what we mean when we say Hashem. It's the feeling that there is infinite time. That past, present, and future, they're all one. There's no difference. It's one expanse. It's one thing. So what happens if you don't have a future at all? What does life look like when you don't have a future? So you're in depression. Depression basically means that there's no future. Yush. I'm in despair, but what am I in despair of? So I'm in despair of everything. But the root cause is that there's no future. So that's why it's very connected to a feeling of I won't be here. I don't want to continue being here. Who felt like that? Who in the Tanakh said, what do I need this for? I'm going to die anyway. Says that Esav. Hineh anochi olech lamut, v'lama li zeh bechora. Behold, I'm going to die, and he even uses the special word anochi, which is very interesting where he got this from. But anochi is the anochi Hashem Elokecha, it's from this week's parsha. It's the exalted I. It's higher than just regular I, rather than just saying ani. And he said, Anochi olech lamut. So meaning he wasn't just talking about himself, he was talking about the Anochi. My soul is going to die. When you say Anochi, you're not talking about your body, you're talking about your soul. So he says, even my soul I feel is passing. So what's the result? So what do I need the firstborn rights for? We'll sell them to you. Because what does it turn out to be? That the firstborn rights, they're only a commodity. I can use them to gain profit. The source of all, call it, turning things into objects, objectification of value, of things that have value, that they're important, is the feeling that everything is passing, everything is fleeting. So why make a big deal out of anything? Values are supposed to be eternal. But if you feel that nothing is eternal, even your soul is not eternal, values change, or whatever it is, so then you objectify them, and you say, value is just something, a value is just something that, well, since it changes, you can also buy and sell it. You can change it however you want. It's all politics in the end. And there's nothing eternal. Where does it all come from? It comes from the fact that you don't feel that there's anything eternal. Even your soul is not eternal. One of the things that, as Jews, we've had this impressed upon us, and this is what changed maybe the Christian world even, is that there's an afterlife. So since the soul continues, so it's not so simple to just do whatever you want, right? It changes the way people behave. The moment you understand that there are repercussions, if you're a nihilist, and you say, eat and drink because tomorrow you die, so you're accountable to nothing. Because in the end, what does it matter? Why would it matter? That's what a nihilist is. You feel that everything in the end, kol hoveh nifsad, that everything that exists in the end breaks apart and falls apart, even the soul. So why protect anything? Why hold anything with infinite value? There's no reason for it. It's a mistake. But if you have an understanding that something is eternal, so wait a minute. So now you have to rethink the whole. What do I hold to be eternal? The moment now, these are theoretical thoughts. Not everybody has them. But if you're a Jew, you grew up as a Jew, or you grew up as a Christian, or you had some connection with the Bible, so what do you feel? You feel that, wait a minute, it's not so simple that you just die and that's it. You can't just do anything you want, because you're accountable. Not just because you're accountable. The way to say it to somebody simple, who doesn't understand more than that, is to tell them, look, when you finish, you have to give an accounting of everything you did. That's a very low way of saying what's eternal to you. What do you value as eternal? Like to say to somebody who's not very philosophical, not very cultured, not learned, and can't think abstractly, to tell them, look, your actions you need to focus your actions, focus your energy, do things that for you are eternal, they mean eternity for you. That's very difficult. A lot of people, especially 200 years ago or 100 years ago, most people couldn't understand what I just said. So how do you get the message across? So you tell them, look, after you pass away, there's a judgment. And in the judgment, they look at what you did. So, you know what? All your actions have to be eternal. But a person can feel really terrible about that, because it's very hard to never ever waste any time. It's almost impossible. Especially if the only fear is that after 120, somebody's going to remember what I did. So as people become more abstract and capable of more abstract thinking and more essential thinking, so this doesn't work anymore. So you can't tell people, look, you know what's going to happen to your soul after after you pass away? It's going to be burnt like this and tossed over like that, and then, so maybe not. How do you know? You've been there? You seen it? What are you talking about? It's very hard to base a life on something that will happen, repercussions that will happen sometime after. Instead, comes the Baal Shem Tov and says, I'm not so interested in the sur mira. I'm not so interested in telling you how not to act. Beware of the punishment. Aseh tov u'mimei sur mira. If you focus on what's good, like some of the prophets even said this, when you focus on doing what's good, in walking with Hashem, walking with the eternal, so the more you understand this, the less time you have for what's not good. The less time the less energy you want to invest in things that are not good, that are not eternal. You want to use your life to touch on what is meaningful, and not waste it on things that are not meaningful. So the more mankind develops and is able to understand the more complex, abstract message, so this whole thing about Gehenom falls away. Instead of what do we say? The Gehenom is the gematria of Gamzu L'Tova. It's like Nachumish Gamzu. The Gehenom just means everything is for the best. That's what you need to exchange it for in your head. In the Tanya, he explains that all these forms of punishment are just, what they mean is how attached you become to something that's not eternal. That's really what it means. It means that if you waste your time on certain things, they do become part of you. And then it becomes hard for you to detach from them and to perceive something that's eternal. So we need a concrete example. So apart from Esav, which we'll explain a little bit more about in a moment. So this week, or last week, I came across something that really shocked me. I don't think you see this more than maybe 2-3 times in your lifetime. And I chanced across, thanks to Medium, a video of a young girl, she's in her 20s, and she has CF, cystic fibrosis, which is a terrible, terrible genetic disease. The life expectancy before the 90s was somewhere in the 20s. In the last 20 years, it's gone up. So life expectancy is in the 30s. But that's it. But it's not a very good life. Especially as they get older, it becomes debilitating at a level that's just unbelievable. So you can read up on it later if you want. In November, 3 months ago, the FDA released an experimental drug, which is called Trifecta. And I said, you don't see so much of this. Maybe now we'll see more of these, but this is like a game changer entirely. What it does is, it gets rid of the underlying problem. It doesn't treat the symptoms, it treats what causes the symptoms. And it treats it well. Not only does it treat it well, it's good for 90% of the people that have CF. So it means there's 2,000 different mutations of this
Very
gene.
good.
And it covers 90% of them. So they estimate that, I don't know why the numbers are what they are, but I read 27,000 people in the United States. It's not very many, but whoever has it, it's... So anyway, this video was like a video log of this woman who started taking it. It's very, very expensive now. It's $300,000 a year. So understand how this works. In any case, so she started taking it, and everybody told her you'd have, headaches and stomach cramps and this and that. But she ended up having to go to the hospital a couple of times and this and that. And it turned out that what was happening was that the drug works so well. It started removing all the mucus from her body, because really what develops is like a thick layer of mucus on all the organs. And it started being removed. So first it came out of the lungs, just coughing her head out. But afterwards, she had terrible stomach pain. She didn't understand what she was. It turned out that it clogged the intestines, and so much was coming out. So they had to flush it out. But it's a good sign. So that's the technical side of it. Why am I telling you this whole story? Because here you see a young lady who's 20. She's tattooed from head to toe. She's pierced from head to toe. You see what her room looks like. She does it in her room, these videos. And you see a person who, without her telling you anything, you know right away that she's given up on life. She's burning the candle on both sides. She has no expectations from life. You see it right away. It's like she doesn't have to tell you anything. Then she did a video 2 weeks or 3 weeks after she started the treatment. And the video is one of the most moving things I've ever seen. It's like, she suddenly says, I suddenly realized I might have to live.
Wow.
Meaning, her expectation was she's not going to make it past her 20s. So that's why she lived the way she lived. She did not live the way she lived. And now suddenly, maybe she's going to make it to 70, like a regular person. She didn't prepare for anything. She didn't go to school. She doesn't have a job. She's not living in the world. Where's she living? In death already. From the time she understood this was her diagnosis, and the prognosis was, you're going to pass away. You can't blame a person who has that type of reaction, because some people don't. Some people would say, well, I have 20 years. I had a friend, and probably told you about it once. I had a friend in college who had a severe heart defect from birth, and they knew 100%. But that's what the doctor said. They knew 100% he's eventually just going to collapse and die, like in a moment. And they gave him till age 20. He passed away when he was 19. But I have never seen a more, I don't know how to call it, like dedicated person to everything that he did. You felt quality. It was like godliness in everything that he touched, at a level that I've almost never seen. Is something incredible. Because he said, if I have 20 years, I'm going to do the most that I can with them. And what he did in 20 years, a lot of people really don't do in their entire lifetimes. From everything he could. He was an athlete, he was a thespian, he was really a good actor. He learned a lot of Torah. It's very interesting. He didn't walk around with a kippah, but he mamish knew a lot of Torah. And when he davened, there was almost nobody I ever saw daven like that. And it was just a phenomenon. Because here's a person who says, if this is what I've been given, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to use every single moment of it. So what was he doing? My understanding today is he was taking from the infinite and putting it into every moment that he has. He wasn't living with the feeling that I have no time. He was living with the feeling I have infinite time. I have infinite ability, the infinite is always coming out in everything that I do. So we need to take it one more step. Esav is Rome. That's how the sages identify him. Say eventually Esav becomes Edom, and Edom becomes the Roman Empire. And about the Roman Empire, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says something very important. He says, don't look at all the things that they've achieved and done, because really everything they do is for their own benefit. How do you know? You're able to look into somebody's kishkas and see what they mean, what they want. Look at what they did. They made roads and they made marketplaces, and they made it safe for everybody to travel the world. And there's definitely an understanding in the sages that when the Roman Empire was in the world, there was a chance. I'm just wondering if it's my son. So in the middle of the class, or somebody else. So they thought it was a tremendous opportunity, because there has to be peace and prosperity in the world for the Mashiach to appear. If that doesn't, that's a precondition. A lot of people, for some reason, associate Mashiach with some kind of catastrophes. There are some prophecies that go in that direction, but even those prophecies, what they mean to say, apparently, is that people can't come into an appreciation of the goodness until they taste something from tremendous hardship. But really, it's only with the goodness, with the peace and prosperity, that the Mashiach can come. So the sages saw this, that the Roman Emperor was bringing peace and prosperity to the entire world. It didn't work out so well for us in the end. But in general, the world was a better place when the Roman Emperor was around. But Rashbi says, don't believe anything that they do, because everything that they do it only for their own benefit. What do you mean? What, it's not an eternal value for people to be prosperous, for people to be healthy, for people to have what they need to eat, to have their needs taken care of? Those are not eternal values? He says, no. Chesed leumim chatat. The loving kindness, meaning the acts of goodness that they're doing, they're really like a chatat. They're really, what is a chatat? Chatat literally means, you can say it's a chet. He didn't say it's a chet. He didn't say it's a sin. He said it's the sin offering. A chatat you bring after you did a sin. You're making up for something. What does it mean? They're doing good not because the good is good, but because the good is a way to make up for something. For what? For all the bad. So hiding underneath all these good things, I'm telling you, is not an interest in timeless values, but rather a chance or an attempt to rectify, to make up for the ills that they've done elsewhere. So it's really, there are really feelings of guilt is what's driving all of this. And the most dangerous thing in the psyche is, as we've talked in many, many times, is feelings of guilt. That's the Yetzer Hara itself. When a person feels shame and guilt, and he does things because of that, that's the worst thing possible in the psyche. You have to do things because they're correct and true, and not because they're trying to make up for something. And every time you do things that way, everything becomes terrible. So what's one of the most interesting examples? What's the first example of somebody doing something for an ulterior motive? So this somebody who I'm in correspondence with, a non-Jew from Canada, he awakened me to this idea. And he told me, look at Lavan. Lavan, he took Yaakov in. He didn't need to take him in. He didn't have to. And he provided him, and he gave him food, and shelter, and so on. And then he gave him his 2 daughters. And eventually he gave him a business opportunity. And Yaakov became a rich man because of him. And then Yaakov walks in the middle of the night, runs away. And poor Lavan, he did so much for his nephew, and he just took advantage of him. That's how he said. That's how it. So I thought about what can I answer? I said, but Hashem, who knows what's going on in a person's heart, has to reveal himself to Lavan at night. And he says, don't harm him. Meaning, it could be that he did all good things, but now that Yaakov is not giving him back the recognition that he thinks he deserves, what does he want to do to him? Kill him. Unbelievable. So what did you do? What was the motive for all the good that you did? Not to help your nephew? No. The motive was recognition, subservience. And if you don't give it to me, then I'll show you. I'll show you where all my power comes from. This is an amazing thing. That if you can't do kindness without expecting something in return, then it's not kindness at all. What is it? It's really a chatat. Really, there's an ulterior motive. You're bringing this kindness in the same way that a person who brings a sacrifice brings it because he did something wrong to begin with. It's not a todah. It's not a sacrifice which is to thank Hashem. It's not a sacrifice that has nothing to do with the past. It's something that's based on a motive. What's my motive? I'll bring this, and you forgive me. If you don't forgive me, what am I going to do? Burn the house down. You cannot forgive me because I already brought the sacrifice. What does that all come from? It all stems from Esav's point of view on reality. Why can't he connect to values just because they're valuable, because they're eternal? Why does everything have to be commerce? Why does everything have to be business? Why is everything for something else? Why is there always a motive? Because to get rid of motives, you have to have infinite time. You have to believe that the soul, the part of you, is higher than the finite. And that you touch on that you understand what that means. You have a feeling in that. It's an amazing thing because we say that Esav came from a higher source than Yaakov. But as high as he came, what does he say? V'anochi olech lamut. It says that in the world of chaos where he came from, the world of Tohu, Elisha equals Tohu. We'll see this in a moment. Elisha is a rectification of the world of Tohu. In the world of Tohu, every king that rules, he also dies. Ve'imloch ve'emot, ve'imloch ve'emot. He ruled, he died, he ruled, he died, he ruled, he died. So even if you have some sovereignty, in the end it ends with death. So even if you do something good, it's all taken away at the end. That's the feeling where Esav comes from. Yaakov doesn't come from there. He comes from a much more practical, lower place. But he senses what's above Esav. He's not from there, but he senses it. His real soul root, that's what he means here by the soul root of a Jew, the Radla, the unknowable head, and we'll say something more about this, but the unknowable head, where faith is higher than even Esav. Esav is just the Reisha de Ain. It's just a feeling of pleasure, which in the end is just demise. Ain. It's just becoming nothing. Everything we talked about last week and the week before was that you can get above the Ain. And above the Ain, there's the Radla. Above the Ain, there's the unknowable head and the crown. And that's where the seat of faith is. And this seat of faith, you only have faith in it. You don't maybe sense it fully, but you have faith in it that in the end, everything is eternal. It doesn't end. I can't live my life as if, well, once they put me in the ground, that's it. No, that's not the end of it at all. And again, it affects how you live. That's the main thing. So says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I know them. They come from Esav. And because they come from Esav, in their mind, the end is near. Always. So there's no eternal values just for the sake of an eternal value. It always has to have a motive behind it. It always has to have some interest, self-interest. And so when you have self-interest, you're in a real problem. How do you teach people who only do everything by self-interest to believe in something higher? That's the purpose of Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit is to bring the rest of the world an understanding that there is something eternal. That was the entire point of Hashem giving us the Torah. To teach the world that Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's not just that Anochi is eternal. So these people are now have this drug, trifecta. So suddenly they have to go through a whole change and they change. They have to, because now they have to live for 70 years. What do I do? I have to go to school. I have to go get a job. Maybe I can get married. Maybe I can have children. Everything changes. So imagine now somebody would tell us, you can eat from the tree of life and live forever. So it all depends. If you're stuck in the consciousness of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, where everything is just cyclical, and you'll live forever, it's terrible. That's nihilism all over again. Because it'll just be repeating infinite stages of life and death and life and death and life and death and life and death forever and ever. Who has that type of mindset? That's what they have in the East. So in the end they say live in the present. But really it's just because get rid of all these thoughts. Just live in the present, because really it's just a cycle that repeats forever. You can't break out of the cycle. But if you're able to use your dat, your consciousness, to attach to eternal values, then you can eat from the tree of life. Then you can live forever. Then it's okay for Hashem to give you eternal life, because you'll know what to do with it. Because you have values that are good for infinite. If all your values are finite, right, they're just self-interest. I do this because it gives me something in return. I do that because so how far ahead can you think? Okay, I'm going to invest in the stock market knowing that in 50 years I will have 30 times what I invested. It's beautiful. But that's good for 50 years. What are you going to do for 5,000 years? Where are your values for that? What can you do for that? So that becomes a question in and of itself. Are you ready for values? Do you have values that can last you eternity? That can dictate what you do, that can give you meaning through what you do in life for an eternal amount of time. So let's not start with eternity, just go to 200 years. Does anybody know today how to live for 200 years? Good question. I know at least one person who does. I know my Rav. I know he can live for 200 years, doesn't have a problem. What he does now, he'll still do. It will be just as eternal. It will be just as good in 150 years as it is now. The Rebbe, same thing. The tzaddikim, they can live forever because they just continue doing the same goodness that they do anyway, because they've always done it because it's an eternal value, not because they're seeking something. But if somebody's doing the goodness in order to become wealthy or to have enough money, so once they have enough money, what are they going to do with themselves? What happens if eternity comes down into here and technologically comes down, meaning that you won't have to work? So what will most people do? They won't know what to do because they don't have eternal values. What do you do with the time? I'm giving you as much time as you want. Not eternity in terms of 1,000 years to live, but just eternity in the sense of that every hour you want in the day, you can always do whatever you want to do. Do you know what to do with your time? This is if you don't know what to do with your time, it's because you don't know how to tap into eternal values. Esav, all he understands is Hollywood. It's pleasure. So he says, the most I can get to is to watch Netflix all day long, all night long.
That's back to Eitz Hadas.
And that's still Eitz Hadas.
That's the whole-
Okay? Because it's expanding consciousness. It's very interesting. It's very good. In the end, you get sick and tired. You can't go on forever. Somebody would say there's no end to the pleasure you can receive because it has a sense of ayin in it. Maybe not. In any case, so this whole concept is all tied into time. It's how you mental health starts from how you perceive your time. How do you perceive what you have in front of you? Is there a future in front of you? Is this future eternal? Can you bring that eternity, that feeling of eternity, into the present moment? So we didn't say this, but the most phenomenal gematria in this whole thing is that if you can feel past, present, and future together, which in Hebrew is Haya, Hoveh, Ve'yeh. Those three words together, they're equal to Chesed.
Really?
It's an amazing, amazing gematria. It means that when you say Chesed, really what you're saying is that your acts of kindness, they encapsulate your perception of time. What you do in life encapsulates and reflects how you perceive time. And if you're like Esav, it's Chesed Lumim Chatat. It's what you're doing is only to make up for something, maybe in the past, maybe in the present, maybe even in the future, but it's not an eternal understanding of time and not doing things because of their limitless, infinite value, their eternal value. But rather it's to try to capture something that's for you to make up for something that either you missed or didn't work well or whatever it is. The beautiful thing about faith, when it's done, when you tap into it the right way, again, faith is a perception of the future. So the name of the part of the crown, we always say it in short, we just say the unknowable head. Unknowable because, like we've said many times, that faith is many times just something that a person has concealed in them. They don't know that they have it even. It's a power in the psyche that they don't even know that they have. But the full name in Kabbalah is not the unknowable head. I'll say it first in Aramaic so I can translate it. But it's Reisha de lo yada, that means unknowable. Yada in Aramaic, can't know. Velo it yada is the unknowable. That's the part that says unknowable. But what does the yada mean? What does it not know? What is hidden from it? There's something that's hidden from it itself. That it can't be known by yourself and by others, that's the second part, the unknowable head. But the lo yada, he doesn't know the future. He doesn't know what will be. He understands that the future is something that is like a formless matter that you can bring into your life and fashion it however you want. That's what this idea is saying. That real faith gives you an infinite ability to draw down more and more energy that can be formed however you want. That's the feeling that you have. So let's get back to this idea of the shemen, of the oil.
What's the
And
first
the eighth
word?
day.
Leisha? Deloyada? What's the first word?
The lo yada velo it yada.
You said Leisha Deloyada?
Reisha.
Reisha.
Oh,
Head.
Reish?
Head.
What?
Head. It means head in Aramaic.
Head. Okay.
The crown has 3 heads in it. So let's get back to the idea of shemen. What is shemen? Shemen, we said, is very connected to future. It's like the 8th day. But why oil? Why of all things would it be oil? So there's a small anecdote which illustrates it. We know that Reb Nachum of Chernobyl was a very hefty man, to say it lightly. Hefty, he's very, very, very heavy. And but he was known to fast most of the time. He hardly ever ate. So they asked him, how could you become so fat? Because you don't need anything. So he said, I become fat from saying Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach L'Olam Olam Me'amaya. So somebody asked me on Shabbos, what in the world is the connection between the two? I said the usual answer. He takes pleasure in exalting Hashem. But it didn't click for me until I prepared this class. That what do we say? Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach L'Olam Olam. What do we mean? May Hashem's name be blessed forever and ever. So and in fact, what it's based on, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach, is from a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, which the translation is Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach. But the original pasuk says, Yidbarach Shmo HaGadol. That's how Yirmiyahu said, may his great name be blessed. It's all about the future. It's a future and an eternal future. So you become fat from the future. The more you have a perception of the future, not talking about if you get fat because you eat too much food, saying that somebody like that, the fat in them represents their perception of the future, how much they grasp the future. So that's just an anecdote, but we want to make it a little bit more of substance, a little fattier.
I guess he deeply cold, he's...
He completely perceived the future all the time, and since it's formless energy, it just collects. But let's make it a little bit more. So what we want to look at is a Gemara in Shabbos that I maybe didn't pass out yet. For some people I did, to others I didn't. Pass it around. Whoever doesn't have it.
Is there another one?
It'll go around.
Don't leave out our dinner.
So there's a halacha that you're not, when there were candles, they used candles and wicks and oil to light their homes. So there's a halacha that you can't read or do things that require careful observation to candlelight on Shabbos. Why? So here we'll see that throughout this translation, I didn't have time to fix it. So in one place I just removed it, and there's a hole, but it needs to be fixed. The reason is that there's something called yateh. Yateh means that you'll, what did he call it here? He will adjust. It really means to move the vessel in which the oil is, to bring the oil closer to the wick. Because think about it, any kind of vessel, it's almost impossible to make a vessel that will use up all the oil that's in it. So at some point you're left with oil in certain places, and you want to bring it closer to the wick. So you tap the vessel and you push it like this, and you bring the oil closer. And what you do is that you're actually extending the amount of time that the light will burn, and that's called mavir. That's one of the toladot of mavir, where it's mavir itself. There's a machlokas in it.
How do you spell that?
Yateh. Yud tet hey. To
You're not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that.
What's mavir? You spell that?
Mavir. Mavir is to light a flame on Shabbos. That's the Av Melachah. Lo tevaru esh b'chol moshavotechem. To light a flame. So if you move the oil towards the wick, so that's mamish and isser. So what did they do? So that's not permitted. But since when you're doing things that require careful observation, you will need the light. So the sages made an injunction, a gzera, that you can't read or do other things that require careful observation next to a candle. Only if the candle is far away, or if there's all kinds of. Because you'll come to, what's the word in English? To tip it. Thank you. Not that hard. One of those easy words. I don't tip, so bad tipper. Okay. So Rava said, so that's the background for what we're going to read now. And Rava said, even though they prohibited reading by candlelight due to a degree lest they tip the oil, here it's going to say all along that adjust the wick. That's incorrect. At least as far as I know. If he is an important person, it is permitted. An important person is allowed. Why? As even on weekdays, he is not accustomed to adjust a lamp that is dirty with oil. So I don't know where he got this explanation, but even on weekdays, he does. Even when it's not Shabbos, he doesn't do that. What does he do? He adds more oil, and then he's not going to do it on Shabbos. The Gemara raises an objection. Because it says in the Tosefta, one may not read a book on Shabbat by the light of the lamp, lest he adjust it. You're again adjusting the oil. The Tosefta relates that Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha said, I will read, and I will not adjust. Okay. as I will certainly not forget that it is Shabbat. That's one of the reasons. He says that I can read and I won't. However, once he read a book by candlelight, and he sought to adjust the oil, and he tipped it. He did exactly what he said, I won't forget. And this is a problem in itself. How can there be a different injunction for different people? It has to be the same. It's called that the sages don't make injunctions for certain people. They never divide things that way. They say if something is prohibited, it's prohibited for everybody. There's no difference. Doesn't matter how smart you are. So once he read a book by God, he sought to adjust the oil. He said, and then he said, how great are the words of the sages who said that one may not read by candlelight. Rabbi Natan says that's not how it happened. It happened a little bit different. He read, and he adjusted the oil, and he wrote afterwards in his notebook, in his pinkas, listen to what he writes. It's an incredible thing. It's almost unheard of. I, Ishmael ben Elisha, read and adjusted the lamp on Shabbat. When the temple will be rebuilt, I will bring a fat sin offering. So the way we read this in the beginning, it's like something that happened. But when you read it in Hebrew, this translation doesn't capture what it says. Really what it says is that Ani Ishmael ben Elisha, I Ishmael, the son of Elisha again. His name was Ishmael ben Elisha. He was a high priest of many things. But his father's name was Elisha, just like our Elisha here with the oil. And he says, Ani ekrav velo ateh, ve'im ateh, and if I do adjust the oil, avi chatat shmena, I will bring the fat. He doesn't say, after I did it, now I say, okay, I remind myself that when there's an opportunity, I'll bring a big sin offering. And know how he says this, chatat shmena, a fat sin offering. So the pshat, why do you say I have to bring a fat sin offering? Just bring a sin offering. So right away you understand it. Since what he did was he adjusted the oil, he tipped the oil. And oil in Hebrew is shemen. So he brings a chadat shmena. That's the easy way to explain what he said. That's how most people explain it. That Ran says this, other commentaries say this also. So it's like lashon nofel al lashon. It's like the language forced him to say chatat shmena. But there's one of the great Hasidic masters, Moshe Leib of Sasov. So he writes an incredible commentary on this. And he didn't write so much. We don't have much from him, but everything that he wrote is like a jewel. It's a pearl. So he says, what Rabbi Yishmael wants to say is, this whole discussion here is also symbolic of something. Apart from the halachic considerations that go into the pshat and everything that it means, there's also a symbolic level to this, what you would call today like a parable and all of this. In the parable, what's called oil in the world? Or what's light? What's light in the world? Light is Torah, Torah Zuhura. So he says there's the Torah that comes into the world is supposed to shine out. It says that normally when you learn Torah, it doesn't reach outside the Jewish people. Why? Because it's only the revealed level. So the revealed level, Jews get it. You're supposed to do this, not do this. This Jews get. Other people, they look at this and they say, it's their customs. I have my own customs. I don't need this stuff. But he says the inner teachings of the Torah, they come from oil. It's called oil. Oil is the inner teachings of the Torah. He says that reaches far out. It goes all the way to Los Angeles. It can even get people there. It can get people in China. It can get people in Japan. It can get people everywhere. The whole world can be lit up by the oil of the Torah, the inner teachings of the Torah. That can bring godliness everywhere. So he says, there's a problem though. that you're not allowed to tip. Not in a restaurant. You're not allowed to, because what is this Shabbat talking about? It's talking about the seventh day. It's talking about the Geulah. It says to bring the Geulah, you have to tip. What does it mean to tip? So he says to tip means to bring the oil to the wick. What do we say that that Esav didn't have? He didn't have a concept of the future. He didn't have a feeling of eternity. And shemen is exactly what reflects that. Oil is exactly the symbol, like we said about Rav Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl. It's how much you grasp the future. How much you have, how fat you become, as it were, is a consequence of how much you understand that things are eternal, that you have to grab onto the eternal. You lead a full life, we even call it a full life. What are you filling it up with? You're filling it up with eternity. So you lead a full life, the more you grasp the eternal values in the world, the more you understand your own eternity. So he says, I will tip, and when the time comes, what will I do? I'll bring a fat sin offering. What is he talking about? So says Moshe Leib of Sassov, he's talking about affecting the non-Jews. He's talking about bringing the light of Torah to the non-Jewish world. It says exactly that. It's hard to believe, but here's a Hasidic Rebbe from 200 years ago, and he's saying the light that the Baal Shem Tov brought down into the world is the Pnimius of Torah. It's the inner light of the Torah, and it has to go out to the entire world because it will affect the entire world. But to do that, you have to tip, meaning you have to bring more oil to the wick. You have to convince people about eternity. You have to convince them that they have time. You have to convince them that what they're doing matters because it's infinite. It's not going to end tomorrow. Your life is not, when they put you on the ground, that's not the end of it. Not at all. Your actions have to be eternal. And it's a matter of faith. So he says, what will I do? When the time comes, I will bring a chatat shmeina. When the time comes, I'll bring a fat sin offering. So what is he saying? There's like an intermediate stage between bringing a offering of thanksgiving and bringing a sin offering. So there's a fat sin offering in the middle. We said that somebody who doesn't have a sense of eternity, everything they do for an interest, for a motive. But there's a stage in between where they begin to understand you don't have to bring a fat one, you can bring a skinny one. It's still the same. It doesn't matter what kind of sheep you bring. It can be a skinny sheep or a fat sheep. But the moment you decide that even in my sin offering, I'm going to make it fat, that already tells me that you have a sense of doing things for their own value, not just because I have an interest in it. Meaning that I'm giving more than I need to give. The moment that I give more than I need to give, that's already a sign that I'm beginning to understand what eternal values really mean. I'm beginning to understand what it means to do things not because I get something back from them, but because they have value in and of themselves. So he says the light of Chassidus is such that it will affect, and the first thing it will affect, says Ishmael ben Elisha. And again, this all goes back to Elisha with the story with the jug of oil. It's going to introduce into the world the feeling that there are eternal values. It's going to help people begin to touch on eternity. And the first sign is going to be that there will be fat sin offerings. It won't just be sin offerings like in the time of the Romans. Here they'll do more than they need to do. Meaning people will begin to understand that I need to do this to feel good, but I don't have to do it in this way. Meaning I don't have to add to what I need to do. But they'll begin to add. Because they begin to understand that what you're doing in life is not to receive some recompensation for what you did. It's because this is something that has eternal value. So this is an amazing explanation of this passage in the Talmud. And Moshe Leib Sassob is very famous that this is one of the things that he did. And I can tell the stories that he had. He had many stories about him that he did things to bring non-Jews closer to Torah that could have cost him his life. But he did it. There's another point here that it's like everything here is be'esech hadat. It's like you almost do it without knowing that you're doing it. So I couldn't think of anything that's more pertinent than putting something on YouTube. You don't know who sees it. You don't know who's affected by it. When you talk to people one-on-one, so you know what you're saying and who you're saying it to. But when you put something the way that we have it now with the technology, it's almost like this is the be'esech hadat. This is without being conscious of where my message is getting to. But the message gets to different people. They need to hear it. And they'll bring and they will bring like you a fat sin offering. They'll begin to understand, wait a minute, there's values that are eternal. We're not here in the world as just specks of dust that have no meaning. And that's what the Pnimius Torah does. That's why it's so important that people see how it affects a person's well-being, his mental well-being. It's like Chassidus is the trifecta of all regular people. If you have CF, you need trifecta. If you're just a person in the world today, you need the inner light of Torah to suddenly understand that, wait a minute, maybe you're not going to live 1,000 years because we're not there yet, but every moment that you live has to be lived as if you're going to live 1,000 years. Everything that you do has to be done for the value in the thing and not in what you're going to get back from it. And it's amazing that everybody begins to understand that today. That when you do things, if you want them to succeed, to have an impact, call it, not necessarily how much you're going to get back from it, but you want to have an impact, you have to do it as if you expect nothing back from it. You have to feel that what you're doing is timeless. If you feel that what you're doing is timeless, then it begins to have an impact on the world. If you feel that you want, people like, again, it sort of reminds me of there's something called Frog and Toad. Everybody has children.
Oh, I like that.
I love them. So my kids love them. And then one time, I can never remember who was the smart one and who was the not so smart one. But they planted the garden. And so I think it was Frog, who wasn't the so smart one. So he planted the garden, then he watered it, and he sits and he waits for it to grow. And he after 3-4 days he's filled with despair, and the garden dies because he doesn't continue to water it. This is people understand that today. That if you're looking to receive quick compensation, chesed lu'mim chatat, if you're looking for your self-interest, you'll never do anything of significance. But if you're willing to ask yourself, what is valuable? What is eternally valuable? The highest eternity I can imagine. Every person can imagine something different. And you begin to invest in that, and you begin to do that without expecting any compensation at all. Suddenly, in a way that you can't explain, you begin to have an impact. It doesn't mean that you'll be compensated, but people will listen to it, and it will affect them. So all this was about bringing the future into the present. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov tried to do, which is to bring the feeling of eternity into the present. To fill everything with oil, with Pnimius Torah. Because this type of learning, even we just learned to Gemara with Pnimius, suddenly the whole story becomes very pertinent. Meaning that to have a wick burn, I have to bring it oil. To have people who don't have Torah burn with light of Torah, to understand what Torah is, you have to bring them oil. You have to bring them a sense of eternal values. If you can't, you talk about them, you explain them. But it's enough to see that you have, even just seeing somebody who has eternal values is the most calming thing in the world. The big chiddush of a Jew in the end, is the light of eternity can dwell inside his body. And you see it. You see the complacency. Even in spite of imminent demise. There's no difference. At every single moment of his life, there's a sense of the infinite. That's what it means to be in touch with Hashem all the time. That Hashem is the eternal. I wanted to add to this just one more point, and then we have to finish. It's very interesting that the Arizal discusses what the rectification of Christianity is. He says a lot of very important things. We know the Rambam writes that Christianity and Islam are paved the way for the Mashiach. But there's a small difference between them, obviously. That Islam, if it has any concept of utopia, world peace, so on and so forth, Mashiach call it, it's still in the future. But the Christians, unfortunately, they have anchored themselves to the past. Impossible to understand. Why in the world would you put this in the past? But it's to say more than that. The moment you've anchored yourself in the past and saying that Mashiach was really in the past already, so you've lost your expectation for the future. It doesn't matter if you're still expecting something more in the future. You still believe that something infinitely important already happened in the past, and therefore your future is not as open as it would be. So the Rizal says something amazing. He says the rectification of that idea is called 50,000 Yovlot. It's called explaining to them that the world will only reach rectification in 50,000 jubilees. It's an amazing
What's
thing.
a jubilee?
Jubilee is 50 years.
50,000 50s.
Right. Meaning 2,500,000 years. Right? I did the math right.
Second, how many?
You're going to have to wait for 2.5 million years. Are you ready to wait that long?
Who said that?
That's what the Arizal says.
Hmm?
That the rectification of that type of thought, that something was in the past, is to just blow their minds with how long it's going to take. For that to appear again will take 2.5 million years. Okay, you've been through 2000, wasn't so bad so far. You only have 2,498,000 to go. No problem. He said, when a person hears that, they might suddenly realize it's the shtus. It's not smart to live your life that way. You have to understand the Mashiach is here already. It's now. The rectification can happen now. The utopia can happen now. The whole thing that you call Yemot HaMashiach, that we call the days of the Mashiach, it's here right now. You don't have to wait 2.5 million years for it. But for that, you have to give up on because his rectification is going to be in only 2.5 million years.
But how do you explain that when the world isn't as beautiful as it's supposed to be when Mashiach comes?
The world, in a
Freedom,
heartbeat,
perception,
could be
perception.
paradise today.
Personal perception.
Not just personal perception. I'm talking about the resources that we have now
Well, enough.
are enough
Right.
to create eternal life. They're enough for everything, from beginning to end. But we don't use them for that. But Hashem has already given everything needed to be able to have a reality that is perfect for human beings. To return to the Garden of Eden. Okay, there's much more to be said, but this is as far as we can go in one class. So Bezat Hashem will continue. There's another small piece. I wanted to do it today on Tu B'Shvat, especially after the Rav's class last night about Etz Chaim and Etz Hadat, but it didn't come out today. So it'll come out next time, God willing.
That's great.